Well, it's good to be here. I was reading a little bit in the book of Romans. I've always enjoyed the book of Romans. I think what Paul was saying here, he's cutting into the meat of people's lives and people's thinking. I'm in chapter 10 of Romans, chapter 10, and I'm going to do the first 3 verses of the chapter because there's so much that is here. There is so much that we can learn from just 3 verses. We first of all see that Paul was writing to believers because he used the word brethren. So he's writing to people that he is under the assumption that they are saved. You know, I don't think that even Paul knew everybody. I wouldn't think that Paul would know everybody's soul, whether they believed on the Lord or not. But he was talking to believers when he uses the word brethren. And you notice that he says, my heart's desire. This wasn't just an average desire. This had his heart mixed with the desire. His desire was a great desire. My heart's desire and prayer to God. See, his desire was mixed with prayer. His desire was mixed with relationship with God. I mean, if you stop and think about it, he's saying here, brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel. Now, who was Israel? Well, we know Israel as the name of being God's people. When he uses the word brethren, he's talking about a particular group, which is the Romans. But here he says, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel. Could he have been talking about the nation of Israel, the land of Israel, in order for them to see the real God, the one and only God, the God that this man Paul knew? Was it his desire to see them? It says that they might be saved. Now, you know, that first verse right there says a lot. There's a lot of people that has a heart's desire, and no doubt this man here had a heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel that they might be saved. That was important to this man named Paul. But if you notice in verse number 2, for I bear them record, meaning I'm talking out of fact. Paul was not guessing on what he says when he says, for I bear them record. That record he knew. He knew Israel's record. He knew the ones that would believe and the ones that wouldn't believe. He knew who they was. I bear them record that they have a zeal of God. A zeal of God. To me, a zeal is a desire of God, a zeal of God, a want to know God, maybe a desire to know God. They have a zeal of God. There's a lot of people that are content with the devil's zeal toward God. They're content with the devil's zeal. But it says here, for I bear them record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge, not according to the ways of God. There's a bunch of people that's got a zeal of God. If you ever go and ask someone to tell you when it was they got saved, a lot of people, they are stunned when you ask them that. It hardly never fails that there's people that is not 100% sure of where they stand in salvation. They know they're a church member. They know that they show up for church. They love their particular denomination. They love their environment. They love the people of the church. They love to even give of their money to the church. I mean, they support the church. They love the church. But a lot of times, it's only a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. You know, I wrote something on Facebook today that just a statement came into my mind that if the only wisdom that we're going to talk about is man's wisdom, then that wisdom is really of no count. And we got a lot of people that are talking their wisdom rather than God's wisdom. Now, when I come out here, I didn't know that I was going to use Romans chapter 10, 1 through 3. I had no idea that that was the area that I was going to look at. My focus was a particular word that there's times that I like watching on YouTube these guys that go into post offices and they're running the camera and they're trying to do their First Amendment activity. And you see some of the cops that really get bent out of shape, and then you get a few that know the rules and knows the laws and don't harass nobody. And but you see both kinds of people. They go in there with these big cameras. Some of them as big as this phone right here, and they know it's a camera. They're doing it to be noticed. They're doing it to be noticed. If they was to go in there with a cell phone like my comb and put it right here in their pocket, the likelihood is that nobody would ever say nothing. No one would ever say anything because it would not be noticeable to the eye. They're wanting to prove a point that they have the legal right to go into a place and video. But they're doing it to make a point. The word stand out talked to me a little bit tonight. Them fellas that has got the camera out there and wanting to stand out, they're wanting to stand out for the Constitution. And you know, it's enjoyable to watch these guys that know the law and they meet up with law personnel that don't know the law. Some of them don't know the law. And these guys are classics of knowing how to push the envelope. But they're doing it to get notice. And I was sort of asking myself tonight, even before I looked on these two verses, how much are we allowing Jesus to be noticed in our life to the world? Do I want to come out here and make a video just to be noticed by the video, or do I want the video to exalt the Lord Jesus? It ain't about me. It ain't about my red shirt. It ain't about my ugly hair. It ain't about my beard or my mustache. It ain't nothing about me. It ain't nothing about the room that is in here. It's all about Him. And remember what I said, the post that I wrote down is, if our wisdom is only a human wisdom, then our wisdom ain't worth salt. Because if it's not mixed with the Lord's wisdom, what have you got? This man here was saying here, brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel that they might be saved. That should be every one of our desires, is to see people born again of the Spirit of God, and so many people are not. You ask a lot of people and you ask them to let them tell you their testimony, they honestly, they don't have a salvation testimony. A lot of people don't. Very few will admit that they was born again. Most of them, well, I go to church, or I'm in this fellowship, and I go to this place, and I sing in the choir here. But if you ever ask them when they met the Lord Jesus Christ, they honestly are dumbfounded. I was. For years, I was. I didn't know the date of my salvation. But I got to the point of I got tired of wondering and not knowing. I didn't want to settle for a zeal of God. A zeal is having a vehicle, but you never run the vehicle. I'll give you an example. Today, in my vehicle that I drive, I have a key, and the end of the plastic part had come off of that key. And so I had to glue it back in place in order to still be able to use it. Well, I had an extra key. Well, the key that I had made was designed to unlock the door, but it also fit the ignition. But you know what? The key that fit the door would go into the switch, and it would even turn over the car. But the car didn't crank. Why? Because that key was made for the door. That key would not allow my vehicle to run from that particular key. I had to literally put that key away and fix the old key, and I've got it being worked on right now. It's drying right now. I hope it'll be hard by in the morning time. But what am I saying? The key that was designed to work the ignition is one key, and the key to unlock the door is another key. And there's a lot of people that settle for the keys of this life in religion, and that's what it says right here. For I bear them record, they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. Their zeal don't give them salvation, is the point that I'm making. In verse 3 it says, for they, these are the ones in Israel now, for they being ignorant of God's righteousness. A lot of people are ignorant of God's ways, of God's righteousness. They're ignorant. What does the word ignorant mean? I always like to explain what that word ignorant means. It doesn't mean that a person is dumb. I've often always have said that the word ignorant means unlearned. I didn't know that that key was just going to run my engine and never start that vehicle. If I would have known that, I would have never took it out and used it. But I had to use the original key that I had to fix in order for it to crank my engine, and it cranked up my engine. But it says here, for they being ignorant of God's righteousness. See, the wrong key didn't work. We have a tendency to want our key of our wisdom and our righteousness, but it won't work. They being ignorant of God's righteousness, meaning the right key, and going about to establish their own righteousness, that means you use the wrong key, and the wrong key doesn't work. How many people today is using the wrong key trying to make it into heaven, but they're using the wrong righteousness? They're using their own righteousness. They're not using the righteousness of God. It says, for they being ignorant of God's righteousness, meaning they are unlearned about the ways of God, the true ways of God, and going about to establish their own righteousness, meaning they're doing it every day. When that verse says going about to establish their own righteousness, meaning that they're working every day with their own ability and their own wisdom, and it ain't turning out. It ain't turning out. It's not going to work. The engine ain't going to run with the key that wasn't designed for the ignition. Will it unlock my door? Yeah. That was what the key was made for. You wouldn't crank the engine, though. How many people is running the wrong key and trying to get to heaven and try to impress the Lord when you don't even crank the engine with the right key? People are trying their level best to impress God with their own shiny new key. That key I had was a shiny key. It was a beautiful key. It was a brand new key. But it was a key that would unlock the door. It wouldn't run the engine. It was designed that if I locked my vehicle, that I would be able to get into the vehicle with the key that I had hidden under the fender of the car. You see what I'm saying? When you use the right key, you make the right connection. It says, for they being ignorant of God's righteousness or God's ways, and going about to establish their own righteousness, meaning the righteousness of man, and have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. Could it be that maybe we're guilty of using the wrong key? Jesus supplied the key of salvation. And there's a lot of people that wouldn't know the day and the hour and the time. Now, there's a lot of people that don't know the actual moment, and that's fine. But you have to remember that there was a change that took place inside the person that was lost at one time, and they come to realize that they needed Jesus. If you're out there tonight and all you have is a zeal of God, you're trying to use the wrong key. And the wrong key won't crank the engine. The right key will make the engine fire up and run the motor. But the wrong key will only let you into the door. It won't let you in to accessing the power. That comes from God Himself. Today, if you're out here and you're trying to access salvation by your own wisdom and ability, it ain't going to work. Jesus let it be known, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. For I bear them record that they have a zeal of God. We need to get away from the zeal. The zeal is taking a lot of people to hell. A zeal of God. It's close, but it's a zeal of God, but it's not according to righteousness. It's not according to the knowledge. For they being ignorant about God's righteousness and going about to establish their own righteousness, that's not going to get you into heaven. Your own righteousness will not work. Oh, you might feel good about yourself. You might feel wonderful. You might feel that you might have goosebumps all over. You know, the devil is able to give you goosebumps too if you're not real careful. I wouldn't settle for the devil's goosebumps, because ultimately his goosebumps is going to send you into the pit. He's telling us here, they have not submitted themselves into the righteousness of God. Something to think about today. Make sure that you got the right zeal. Make sure that you got the right salvation. The Lord will witness the right salvation if you really want it. Elderly Ministry is the YouTube channel. elderlyministry.com is the website. Either one of them two places, you can leave me a message, you can leave me an email. You have a cell number there that you can call. If you leave your name and leave me a detailed message, I will definitely do my very loving best to get back to you. But I would ask you that you just leave me a message and let me know that you want to talk. I pray that this has ministered to you today. Don't settle for the zeal. It won't get you into heaven, I promise you. Thank y'all for tuning in.